threatening to murder you. He had what seemed to be a large knife in his hand, a glove box as a potential hazard. It was lovely to sit in solitude. I'm sure he wanted to puke as much as I did. Therefore, we had to come up. Field trips are one of the most enjoyable aspects of school. Therefore, today we'll discuss scary true field trip stories and field trip horror stories. My classmates and I were looking forward to our class field excursion to Washington, D.C. The excitement of going on a trip with your partner. After that, just having pals was enough to get us excited. We had completed all of our preparations and were ready to travel to D.C. As soon as we got at our destination, there were around 100 pupils in the class, divided into 3 categories. And there were 3 more of us in these groupings. Companions in the hotel. Each group was sent off in a different direction, a variety of coach buses. And we'd be taken to several tourist spots, all of DC's bordering states, monuments, parks, snack stops, museums, and other attractions. We're following a long weekend of sightseeing. Our professors chose instructive websites. One to take us on a colonial ghost tour. It was a nighttime walking tour by way of some of America's iconic landmarks, places near historic graves and local cemeteries, houses in the city. I'm not sure what I'm talking about. I'm not sure the city we were in, but I recall many of the vacant spaces. According to our guides, because of their historical significance, dwellings have been conserved. Importance in history. I've always been that way. Most things relating to ghosts make me squeamish. But I was certain that nothing was the case. We split off to see what would happen on our ghost tour, dividing into smaller groups of about 10 members each, and they were told to, if we wanted to, we could bring a camera with us. Our guide warned us not to expect much from the tour, although there would very certainly be. During this time, there will most likely be nothing supernatural. The evening's progress, as we moved from colonial home to a parcel of land next to a colonial house. I was only curious about the past, that the tour guides would give information about each property. They would regale us with tales of each homeowner, whereas my acquaintances would open photographs and click away to locate a gleaming. I was orping one of my buddies, Jana. Having someone to share a room with on the vacation was a great experience. Not one of the youngsters that were always yelling. She'd take a photo, she'd take a picture, every now and again, take a snapshot. But I spend the most of my time listening to my music. Eventually, the party arrived at a little 2-story house inn. The home was in the middle of the street. The windows have an eerie blue tint to them, but the home was deserted. I recall being piqued my interest. The tour leader started telling us a story, a little bit about the house. She mentioned he admired a man and his lovely wife. His wife and the pair were overjoyed. They were informed that they would be expecting to have a kid. Sadly, the wife died soon after, giving birth to a female. The man was completely distraught and started to despise his filial daughter. He kept her in the house throughout her childhood. He reminded himself as much as he could about the home, her about how unprepossessing she seemed, and couldn't find a suitor who felt the same way about her. She didn't have any other goals. He was in possession of his. Sewing and weaving are 2 skills that my daughter has picked up, utilizing her sole redeeming quality. After hearing this narrative, her hands. Keep in mind how sad I was for this. She must have lived with her father as a little girl, unhappy in that house till they found a new home. Jana, a friend of mine, we both took a picture of the home. I went on to the next residence I was keeping an eye on. Jana continued walking until she came to a complete halt, silently peering through her digital camera display of the camera. I approached and surveyed the area. I saw a glimmer in the shot, on the 2nd floor window's edge. The appropriate. I asked her to zoom in on the site. You could definitely see after zooming in 3 people peering out of the darkness window. The transparent was on the way right. A woman's outline was drawn by a taller guy, even from behind her to the side. Intriguingly, there was a 3rd figure. She seemed to be a lady, but she was actually a male. The presence of a body was more difficult to discern, sure, but her skin wasn't as clear as it may have been. The first time Jana and I saw it, we both freaked out. To me, in the terms woman and man made sense, would elucidate the man's and his daughter's situation. But who was this mysterious woman in their midst? The other. I had to raise my hand and inquire. Emmanuel, was there ever someone else who resided in the house with this family? We had only looked at the guide. I was taken aback, and my query went unanswered. During their time in residence, yes, they had a black female servant who lived with them, along with them. Hi guys, before you keep watching the video, if you want to send a personal true horror story of yours, please send it to me on my email, and I will contact you for sure. Also, don't forget to keep watching your video. We went on an end-of-year field trip to a nearby aquarium while I was in 7th grade. We reside near Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies. Nothing except hills and mountains can be found in this alpine village. Mountains that stretch as far as the eye can see. Mr. Pedro, our science instructor, was one of our favorites. He was the trip's fantastic guy due to a dearth of teachers, while other teachers, chaperones, were stricter and more uptight with their respective groupings. Mr. Pedro appeared to be more relaxed about his work. This may appear to be a positive thing, but because of his sloppiness when it comes to, my friend Sam and I were in charge of overseeing each other, able to exit the aquarium with ease. Separate yourself from the rest of the crowd in the lobby. We simply did not want to wait any longer. Thus, it took a long time for all of the groups to move the ball, except for us. The entire aquarium was deserted. As a result, as Sam and I walked out of class, I suppose through the passages, as you would say, there are observation places. We didn't see anyone else before them. We had the greatest views of anybody else. All of the large fish tanks and ecosystems that we have. All of us walked onto the next dark room. They had a dark blue hue to them. By the way, this room gets its name from the fish tanks. There were a number of large tanks with tropical fish in them. We were joking about finding fish. Clownfish and dory are examples of Nemo fish. When I think of fish, I think of someone in a very strong tone. He says hello to us. A strong voice. It was a man in the room. He was dressed in cargo shorts and a green t-shirt. Inquired whether we were on the field trip. I was ready to say no with a shake of my head, but yes, Sam responded. The man had told us to come. Right moment with him. We both believed he was employed with. We followed him because he wasn't in the aquarium. Despite this, he returns us to the lobby, was guiding us through some dark and tight passages. I recall passing through the corridors. There were a few exit signs hanging from the ceiling, as well as bathrooms, before reaching an exit. On the ceiling, he escorted us outside to a rear location through the door. A visitor in the woods. I eventually inquired if he was, where he was leading us, and what he was doing there. Yes, he did work there. He stated he had to take us back to the starting point. To be allowed to enter the aquarium, you must stand in front of it. It made as much sense back then as it does now. It does today. But we were too frightened at the time. 7th grades who mistook us for 8th graders. I'm going to get into a lot of trouble. So when we eagerly entered his car once he took us there, he told us to buckle up in the rear seats. Then he drove away from the back parking lot, just like we did in the parking lot, and into the roadway. He assumed he was going to do a U-turn. He turns left and right as he approaches the front. Sam and I both inquired about his whereabouts. He didn't know he was going at the same moment. Answered the question, but only for approximately 5 minutes. We heard the locks to the door open a few seconds later. He made some noise by closing the back doors. A threat along the lines of, what if one of you tries to make a move, I'll stop you. He then started to slip out, threatening to murder you. He had what seemed to be a large knife in his hand. A glove box is a potential hazard. It was lovely to sit in solitude. I'm sure he wanted to puke as much as I did. I wanted to. Therefore, we had to come up with a plan. We were able to flee, but we couldn't communicate with each other because the man kept peering into the room every other second in the rearview mirror. He was driving us uphill through very difficult terrain till he moved to a wooded, remote neighborhood. Eventually, I pulled over to the side of the road, and what looked to be the middle of the road. There are no dwellings and no through traffic in the middle of nothing. As he got inside the car, he urged us to stay in it, holding his knife in his hand. He went out. I keep my voice low. Sam should be ready to run as soon as possible. I told the man who arrived to my house that my door had popped. He told me to walk out when it opened. I'm going to inform my pal that if he wants me, he can have me. He had best be in the automobile before the end of the day if he wants to stay alive. I sensed the intensifying as we returned. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach when I heard it. The man began leading me towards the woods. He was most likely carrying a knife in his pocket. God knows what you're up to. Sam had slipped across to my side of the room, the automobile with the unlocked door, and when he appeared to be on the verge of fleeing, I said, "Run." Sam was already on the move. I easily avoided the man as I down the slope. Sam the man sped past him as he ran. I tried chasing us down on foot and failed miserably. I'm not even joking when I claim he tossed the ball. He aimed a knife at me and narrowly missed. missed by a few inches. A couple more inches. I could hear the knife clashing. I didn't anticipate striking the ground ahead of me. Take a break to pick it up, I simply continued running, downward in the direction from which we arrived. After throwing the ball, the man stopped following. I believe he returned to his car. He managed to flee the scene in some way, returned to the aquarium in under an hour. We also managed to sneak back after 1 hour. Within the group, Mr. Pedro was completely oblivious to Sam and myself, agreed to remain silent about what had just happened. What use would it serve if this happened? Getting ourselves into difficulty as a result of this. There was a little likelihood of that happening. As we grew older, we became more aware of the dangers of being caught. I began to wonder what the problem was as time went on. We were able to figure out what that man's aims were. Naturally, there are a handful that come to mind, but in any case, we